On the surface, Emily Carter's life looked like the glossy cover of a suburban lifestyle magazine. A charming two-story colonial house in a cul-de-sac, trimmed hedges, a white picket fence, and a Labrador retriever that bounded out to greet neighbors every morning. Inside, her husband David was the picture of success, a respected financial consultant who commuted into the city, dressed sharply, and always seemed to know the right words to win over clients, and people in general. Their 7-year-old son, Noah, was the kind of child who could make even the grumpiest neighbor smile with his messy hair and infectious laugh. To the outside world, the Carters embodied the American dream. Emily often caught herself believing it too, especially during those golden evenings when David grilled steaks in the backyard, Noah played catch with the dog, and she poured glasses of chilled Chardonnay while watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. It was a tableau of perfection, one that many in the neighborhood envied. And yet, even in the heart of this seemingly perfect life, Emily felt a faint whisper of unease. She loved her family, adored her son, but sometimes she caught herself staring at David's phone a little too long, noticing how often he seemed distracted, his gaze drifting somewhere else. She brushed it off as paranoia, a side effect of her own insecurities. After all, wasn't this what she had always wanted? Stability. A beautiful home. A husband who provided. A child who completed their world. Still, that whisper lingered in the back of her mind, until the day Samantha Hayes moved in next door. It was early spring when the moving truck arrived, parking in front of the vacant house that had stood empty for months. Emily watched from her kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, as a striking woman in her early 30s directed the movers with effortless poise. Samantha was tall, with waves of auburn hair that shimmered in the sunlight, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged wherever she went. By afternoon, Emily decided to do the neighborly thing. She baked a quick batch of chocolate chip cookies, arranged them on a plate, and walked across the lawn with Noah tugging at her hand. When Samantha opened the door, Emily nearly forgot her rehearsed greeting. Up close, Samantha was even more stunning, emerald green eyes, a disarming smile, and a warmth that made you feel like you'd known her forever. "Hi, I'm Emily. I live next door," she said, holding out the cookies. Samantha's smile widened. "You're a lifesaver. I've been so busy unpacking, I haven't eaten a thing all day. Please, come in." The two women sat in Samantha's half-furnished living room, Noah playing quietly with a toy truck while they talked. Samantha explained that she had recently left a high-pressure marketing job in New York and was looking for a quieter, more balanced life. "I needed a change," she said, sipping coffee. "And this neighborhood seemed perfect. Safe. Family-oriented." Emily found herself nodding along, drawn to Samantha's openness. Within minutes, it felt less like a polite introduction and more like the beginning of a friendship. They swapped stories about work, motherhood, and the challenges of balancing it all. By the time Emily stood to leave, Samantha had already extended an invitation. "We should do yoga together sometime. Or wine night. I could use a friend here." That night, Emily told David about the new neighbor as they cleared the dinner table. "She's incredible," Emily said, almost breathless. "Smart, funny, and honestly, gorgeous. I think we'll really get along." David raised an eyebrow. "Gorgeous, huh? Should I be worried?" he teased, grinning as he stacked plates. Emily laughed, rolling her eyes. "Relax. I'm just saying, it's nice to have someone like her nearby. I've been feeling a little isolated lately." David kissed her cheek absently, already distracted by a notification on his phone. Emily noticed the flicker of light on his face, the way his smile faded into something unreadable. For a moment, that whisper of unease stirred again, but she pushed it down. Over the next few weeks, Samantha seamlessly wove herself into the fabric of Emily's life. They went to the local yoga studio together, swapped recipes, and spent evenings drinking wine on Emily's patio while David grilled dinner. Samantha had a magnetic energy, the kind of charm that made people lean in closer, eager to bask in her glow. Neighbors quickly took notice. "Your new friend is a knockout," one mom from the PTA whispered to Emily. "She looks like she stepped straight out of a magazine." Emily smiled politely, but inside she felt a strange mixture of pride and something else she couldn't quite name. Having Samantha by her side made Emily feel more interesting, more alive, as if Samantha's light reflected onto her. Yet, late at night, as she lay in bed beside David, she sometimes caught him staring at his phone, his expression unreadable. She wondered if he was thinking about work, or something else. She glanced at the glowing screen, tempted to ask. But instead, she turned away, telling herself that everything was fine. After all, they were the perfect suburban family. And Samantha? She was just a friend. At least, that's what Emily wanted to believe. In the weeks that followed, Samantha became more than just Emily's new neighbor, she became a fixture in her daily life. Their bond grew quickly, almost too quickly, like ivy spreading across a wall. Emily had never been the type to make fast friends, she tended to keep her circle small, focusing on her family, a handful of PTA moms, and an old college roommate she still texted from time to time. But with Samantha, it felt different. It felt easy. One crisp Saturday morning, Emily found herself on a yoga mat at the local studio, positioned awkwardly between women in sleek Lululemon outfits. She had always been self-conscious about yoga, about whether her poses were right or if she looked foolish. But Samantha flowed through the movements effortlessly, her posture graceful and strong. When Emily wobbled during tree pose, Samantha flashed her an encouraging smile that somehow steadied her. "Don't worry," Samantha whispered, her voice like velvet. "No one's perfect. Not even me." Emily laughed softly, though she wasn't sure she believed the words. Samantha seemed flawless, her body toned, her confidence unshakable. Next to her, Emily felt ordinary. And yet, instead of making her insecure, Samantha's presence made her push harder, like having a personal cheerleader by her side. After class, they grabbed smoothies at a trendy cafe. Samantha leaned in, her elbows resting on the counter, her eyes glinting with mischief. "So, tell me," she said, sipping her green drink, "what's your marriage really like?" The question caught Emily off guard. Most friends, especially new ones, tended to tiptoe around topics like that. But Samantha asked with such directness, such genuine curiosity, that Emily found herself answering honestly. "It's good," she said cautiously. "David works a lot, but he's a great father. We've been together since college, so sometimes it feels routine, I guess. Predictable." Samantha smirked knowingly. "Routine is the death of passion, you know. Men, especially men like David, they crave excitement." Emily tilted her head. "You've barely even met him." "I've met enough men to know the type," Samantha replied, her tone casual but her words sharp, deliberate. "Successful. Polished. Always in control. But underneath? They're hungry for something new. Something thrilling." Emily felt a chill despite the warmth of the cafe. She tried to laugh it off, dismissing the comment as just Samantha's bold personality. But that whisper of unease stirred again. Still, Emily couldn't deny the allure of Samantha's company. They began spending evenings together, sipping wine on Samantha's back porch while Noah played video games inside. Samantha always had a story, about her glamorous life in New York, her high-profile clients, the men who chased her and the mistakes she'd made. Emily listened raptly, both intimidated and enthralled. "You're lucky," Samantha said one night, swirling her glass of red. "You've built a family. A real home. I've never had that. My life's been chaos. Fun, yes. But empty. Sometimes I think I'd trade all my adventures for what you have." Emily smiled, touched by the vulnerability in Samantha's voice. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't the one who should be envious. Maybe Samantha wasn't as perfect as she seemed. The next weekend, Samantha invited Emily and David over for dinner. Emily helped set the table while David uncorked a bottle of wine, and the three of them laughed like old friends. Samantha cooked with surprising skill, moving around the kitchen like she'd done it 1,000 times. She complimented David's choice of wine, teased him about his grilling habits, and even convinced him to join them for a game of charades after dessert. Emily noticed how David's eyes lit up around Samantha, how his laughter came easier. She brushed it off at first, after all, who wouldn't be charmed by her? But as she watched Samantha lean in, touching David's arm during a joke, Emily felt a flicker of discomfort. Later that night, after Samantha hugged them both goodbye, Emily mentioned it in the car. "She's very friendly with you," Emily said carefully. David chuckled, starting the engine. "She's just being nice. Don't overthink it." Emily forced a smile, but her stomach tightened. The following days blurred into a comfortable routine. School drop-offs, grocery runs, yoga sessions, wine nights. Samantha seemed to slip into Emily's life like a missing puzzle piece. When David worked late, Samantha kept her company. When Emily doubted herself as a mother, Samantha offered reassurance. When Emily complained about the monotony of suburban life, Samantha promised to bring a little excitement. "She's the sister I never had," Emily told her mother over the phone one afternoon. But late at night, as she lay awake listening to David's steady breathing, she wondered why that thought didn't comfort her as much as it should. Because sometimes, when Samantha laughed at one of David's jokes, or when her eyes lingered a second too long, Emily felt something prick at the edges of her mind. Something she didn't dare name yet. For now, she told herself, Samantha was just a friend. A blessing in an otherwise predictable life. And maybe that was true. Or maybe it was the beginning of something far more dangerous. In the weeks that followed, Samantha became more than just Emily's new neighbor, she became a fixture in her daily life. Their bond grew quickly, almost too quickly, like ivy spreading across a wall. Emily had never been the type to make fast friends, she tended to keep her circle small, focusing on her family, a handful of PTA moms, and an old college roommate she still texted from time to time. But with Samantha, it felt different. It felt easy. One crisp Saturday morning, Emily found herself on a yoga mat at the local studio, positioned awkwardly between women in sleek Lululemon outfits. She had always been self-conscious about yoga, about whether her poses were right or if she looked foolish. But Samantha flowed through the movements effortlessly, her posture graceful and strong. When Emily wobbled during tree pose, Samantha flashed her an encouraging smile that somehow steadied her. "Don't worry," Samantha whispered, her voice like velvet. "No one's perfect. Not even me." Emily laughed softly, though she wasn't sure she believed the words. Samantha seemed flawless, her body toned, her confidence unshakable. Next to her, Emily felt ordinary. And yet, instead of making her insecure, Samantha's presence made her push harder, like having a personal cheerleader by her side. After class, they grabbed smoothies at a trendy cafe. Samantha leaned in, her elbows resting on the counter, her eyes glinting with mischief. "So, tell me," she said, sipping her green drink, "what's your marriage really like?" The question caught Emily off guard. Most friends, especially new ones, tended to tiptoe around topics like that. But Samantha asked with such directness, such genuine curiosity, that Emily found herself answering honestly. "It's good," she said cautiously. "David works a lot, but he's a great father. We've been together since college, so sometimes it feels routine, I guess. Predictable." Samantha smirked knowingly. "Routine is the death of passion, you know. Men, especially men like David, they crave excitement." Emily tilted her head. "You've barely even met him." "I've met enough men to know the type," Samantha replied, her tone casual but her words sharp, deliberate. "Successful. Polished. Always in control. But underneath? They're hungry for something new. Something thrilling. Emily felt a chill despite the warmth of the cafe. She tried to laugh it off, dismissing the comment as just Samantha's bold personality. But that whisper of unease stirred again. Still, Emily couldn't deny the allure of Samantha's company. They began spending evenings together, sipping wine on Samantha's back porch while Noah played video games inside. Samantha always had a story, about her glamorous life in New York, her high-profile clients, the men who chased her and the mistakes she'd made. Emily listened raptly, both intimidated and enthralled. "You're lucky," Samantha said one night, swirling her glass of red. "You've built a family. A real home. I've never had that. My life's been chaos. Fun, yes. But empty. Sometimes I think I'd trade all my adventures for what you have." Emily smiled, touched by the vulnerability in Samantha's voice. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't the one who should be envious. Maybe Samantha wasn't as perfect as she seemed. The next weekend, Samantha invited Emily and David over for dinner. Emily helped set the table while David uncorked a bottle of wine, and the three of them laughed like old friends. Samantha cooked with surprising skill, moving around the kitchen like she'd done it 1,000 times. She complimented David's choice of wine, teased him about his grilling habits, and even convinced him to join them for a game of charades after dessert. Emily noticed how David's eyes lit up around Samantha, how his laughter came easier. She brushed it off at first, after all, who wouldn't be charmed by her? But as she watched Samantha lean in, touching David's arm during a joke, Emily felt a flicker of discomfort. Later that night, after Samantha hugged them both goodbye, Emily mentioned it in the car. "She's very friendly with you," Emily said carefully. David chuckled, starting the engine. "She's just being nice. Don't overthink it." Emily forced a smile, but her stomach tightened. The following days blurred into a comfortable routine. School drop-offs, grocery runs, yoga sessions, wine nights. Samantha seemed to slip into Emily's life like a missing puzzle piece. When David worked late, Samantha kept her company. When Emily doubted herself as a mother, Samantha offered reassurance. When Emily complained about the monotony of suburban life, Samantha promised to bring a little excitement. "She's the sister I never had," Emily told her mother over the phone one afternoon. But late at night, as she lay awake listening to David's steady breathing, she wondered why that thought didn't comfort her as much as it should. Because sometimes, when Samantha laughed at one of David's jokes, or when her eyes lingered a second too long, Emily felt something prick at the edges of her mind. Something she didn't dare name yet. For now, she told herself, Samantha was just a friend. A blessing in an otherwise predictable life. And maybe that was true. Or maybe it was the beginning of something far more dangerous. David wasn't the kind of man who sought temptation. He prided himself on being dependable, the one everyone could count on. For years, he had built his life around routine, early mornings at the gym, long hours at the office, evenings with Emily and Noah. Stability was his strength. But temptation has a way of finding cracks in even the strongest walls. And Samantha knew exactly where those cracks were. It started with small favors. "David, can you help me move a few boxes from the garage?" she asked one Saturday morning while Emily was at yoga. He hesitated, but Samantha's smile disarmed him. "Of course," he said, telling himself it was nothing. Just helping a neighbor. The boxes turned out to be heavier than expected, stacked high in the back of her garage. As he lifted, Samantha stood close, closer than necessary, her perfume curling around him. When one of the boxes slipped, she reached instinctively, her hand brushing against his arm. Their eyes met for just a second too long. "Thanks," she said softly, her voice carrying an intimacy that didn't belong. David cleared his throat, stepping back. "No problem." But when he walked home afterward, the faint warmth of her touch lingered in his mind. Another time, Samantha invited him in for coffee after he helped fix a leaky faucet in her kitchen. Emily was working late, Noah at a playdate. They sat at her counter, steam rising from their mugs. Samantha leaned forward, her chin resting on her hand. "You must get tired of being perfect all the time," she said, her eyes locked on his. David chuckled, though uneasily. "Perfect? Far from it." She smiled knowingly. "That's the thing, David. Emily sees you as flawless, but I see the man underneath. The one who wants more than just routines." Her words hit a nerve he didn't know existed. Was that true? Did Emily only see the version of him that never cracked, never faltered? David shifted uncomfortably. "I love my wife," he said firmly, as though the words alone could anchor him. "I know," Samantha replied, her tone silky. "But loving someone doesn't mean you never feel restless." David left soon after, unsettled by her implication. Yet as he drove home, he couldn't shake the way she had looked at him, as if she saw something Emily didn't. The next crack appeared one stormy evening. Emily was out of town visiting her parents, and Samantha called in a panic. "David, I'm sorry to bother you," she said breathlessly over the phone. "The power's out, and I'm alone. Could you just come check? I hate storms." He hesitated, glancing at the rain lashing against the windows. He should have said no. He should have told her to call the electric company. But instead, he grabbed his jacket. When he arrived, Samantha greeted him at the door in a silk robe, her hair damp from a shower. Candlelight flickered through the living room, casting shadows across her face. "You're a lifesaver," she whispered. David inspected the breaker, restored the power, and was ready to leave. But Samantha poured 2 glasses of wine, insisting he stay until the rain slowed. They sat on the couch, the storm raging outside, the wine loosening his guard. Samantha leaned in close, her laugh soft, her hand brushing his knee. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she murmured. David froze. Every fiber of his being screamed to stand up, to leave. But he didn't. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like if he didn't leave, if he let her hand stay, if he leaned in just a little closer. The thought alone felt like betrayal. He stood abruptly, setting the glass down. "I should go," he said, his voice strained. Samantha's eyes followed him to the door, her smile faint but knowing. "You'll be back," she said softly, almost to herself. That night, David lay awake in bed, his mind a battlefield. He loved Emily. He loved his family. But Samantha had planted a seed, a dangerous curiosity that gnawed at him. He told himself he hadn't crossed a line. Not yet. But deep down, he knew temptation wasn't something you could flirt with forever. It demanded an answer. And David wasn't sure how much longer he could say no. David always thought betrayal would announce itself with sirens in his head, some blaring alarm that screamed, "Stop, don't do this." But when it happened, the world was silent. It was late on a Friday evening. Emily had taken Noah to visit her parents in Vermont for the weekend. David planned to use the time catching up on paperwork, maybe watching a game. Instead, his phone buzzed with a text. "Samantha, I made too much dinner. Want to help me eat it?" He stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. He could have ignored it. He should have. But after a long week and a quiet house, the thought of warm food and warmer company tugged at him. "Just dinner," he told himself as he typed back, "Sure. I'll stop by." Her home smelled of rosemary and garlic when she opened the door. She wore a simple black dress, nothing overtly provocative, yet it clung to her in a way that made David's chest tighten. "Come in," she said, her smile lingering just a second too long. They ate at her candlelit table, the wine flowing easier than it should have. Samantha asked about his work, about Noah, about his childhood, questions Emily hadn't asked in years. She listened with intent, laughing at his jokes, her gaze never drifting to her phone. It was intoxicating, that undivided attention. After dinner, they carried their glasses into the living room. Rain tapped softly against the windows, a gentler echo of the stormy night weeks earlier. David sat on the couch, Samantha close enough that their knees brushed. Neither moved away. "You're too good for her, you know," Samantha whispered suddenly, her voice low. David frowned. "Emily. Don't say that." Samantha's eyes glistened. "I just mean, she doesn't see you. Not the way I do. She takes you for granted." "That's not true," he said, but his protest was weak, unconvincing even to himself. Samantha placed her hand over his. "You deserve to be wanted, David. Truly wanted." The room felt smaller, the air thick. David's pulse hammered in his ears. He should have pulled his hand away. Instead, he let it rest beneath hers. Their eyes locked. And in that suspended moment, all the justifications and excuses dissolved. Samantha leaned forward. David didn't stop her. Their lips met. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant. But when David didn't pull away, Samantha pressed harder, her hand sliding to his neck. His glass slipped from his grasp, forgotten on the carpet. It was wrong. Every nerve in his body screamed it. But the part of him that had been starved for years, the part aching to feel desired, overpowered the guilt. By the time they pulled apart, both were breathless. "I shouldn't have," David whispered, shaking his head. Samantha touched her forehead to his. "Don't think. Just feel." She kissed him again, and this time David kissed back fully, hungrily. The floodgates had opened, and there was no going back. Hours later, David lay awake in Samantha's bed, staring at the ceiling as guilt clawed at him. She slept beside him, one arm draped across his chest like he belonged to her. He didn't move. Didn't breathe too loudly. He felt like an intruder in his own skin. This wasn't him. He was the faithful husband, the dependable father, the man people trusted. But one night had rewritten everything. He slipped out of bed quietly, dressing in the dark. Samantha stirred, murmuring his name. "I should go," he whispered. "Stay," she pleaded sleepily, reaching for him. He hesitated. Then shook his head. "I can't." The drive home was endless, headlights blurring against the rain-slick streets. David gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Every mile carried the weight of his betrayal heavier on his chest. By the time he stepped into his quiet house, the silence felt suffocating. He leaned against the wall, his breath shallow. What had he done? He told himself it was a mistake. A one-time lapse. He would bury it, move forward, and Emily would never know. But deep down, David knew the truth. Once the line was crossed, there was no erasing it. The man who walked into Samantha's house earlier that night was not the same man who walked back out. And the secret he carried would begin to poison everything he touched. David told himself it was just once. A mistake. A weak moment. But mistakes are easier to repeat once the first barrier is broken. The week after his night with Samantha was torture. He moved through his days as if on autopilot, going to work, packing Noah's lunch, kissing Emily goodbye. Outwardly, nothing had changed. But inside, everything was different. Every time Emily smiled at him, guilt gnawed at his stomach. Every time Noah asked him to play catch, shame burned behind his ribs. He couldn't look at his family without seeing Samantha's face in the shadows of his mind. And then came her text. "Samantha, I can't stop thinking about you. Come over tonight." David stared at the glowing screen, his heart pounding. He knew he should delete the message, block her number, erase her from his life before the damage spread any further. Instead, he found himself typing back, "I'll be there." One night became two. Two became four. Soon, their stolen hours weren't accidents but patterns. David would tell Emily he had late meetings or extra gym sessions. She believed him, why wouldn't she? He had never given her a reason not to. Meanwhile, Samantha knew exactly what she was doing. She wore dresses that left little to the imagination, cooked dinners she claimed were just for him, whispered words that slipped under his skin. "You don't have to pretend with me," she'd say, tracing her fingers along his chest. "I know what you need." And David, weakened by the thrill and the secrecy, let himself believe her. But with every stolen kiss, every night spent in her bed, the lies grew heavier. At work, he forgot deadlines. At home, he forgot conversations with Emily, nodding absent-mindedly while she talked. Noah noticed his father's distraction too. "Dad?" the boy asked one evening as David scrolled through his phone, waiting for Samantha's text. "Why don't you laugh at Mom's jokes anymore?" The words pierced him deeper than any accusation. He set the phone down, forcing a smile. "I'm just tired, buddy." But Noah's wide eyes told him he wasn't convinced. The double life was unsustainable, and David knew it. But the more entangled he became, the harder it was to imagine cutting Samantha off. She wasn't content being the secret anymore. "You can't keep living like this," she told him one night, her tone sharper than usual. "Do you really want to grow old with a woman who doesn't see you? Or do you want someone who actually desires you?" David pulled back, frowning. "Don't talk about Emily like that." Samantha's eyes narrowed. "Then why are you here, David? If you love her so much, why are you in my bed?" The truth hung heavy in the room, undeniable. David had no answer. As weeks bled into months, cracks began to show. Emily noticed his late nights, his sudden defensiveness, the way he kept his phone turned face down. "Is something wrong?" she asked one Sunday morning, her eyes searching his. "No," David lied quickly, too quickly. "Work's just stressful." Emily studied him, silent for a moment, then nodded. "You tell me if it was more than that, right?" "Of course," he said, forcing a smile. But inside, guilt roared so loudly it nearly drowned him. The spiral tightened further when Samantha grew bolder. One afternoon, she called him at work, something she had never done before. His stomach dropped when he saw her name on the screen. "Sam, I told you not to call me here," he hissed, glancing at the office door. "I miss you," she purred. "When are you leaving her?" David's chest constricted. "I'm not leaving Emily." A pause. Then Samantha's voice, low and threatening, "You can't keep stringing me along forever. Choose me, or I'll make sure Emily finds out." The threat hung in the air like a loaded gun. David slammed the phone down, his pulse racing. For the first time, he saw Samantha not as an escape but as a danger. That night, lying beside Emily as she slept peacefully, David stared at the ceiling, wide-eyed. He could feel the walls of his double life closing in. He thought back to the man he used to be, the man who believed in loyalty, who wore his wedding ring with pride, who taught his son about honesty. That man was gone, replaced by someone weaker, someone trapped. David had stepped into Samantha's world willingly. But now, he wasn't sure he could get out without everything he loved being destroyed. And deep down, he feared it was already too late. Secrets have weight. The longer David carried his, the heavier it became. He felt it in the stiffness of his shoulders, in the tightness of his chest, in the way he startled whenever Emily's voice called his name unexpectedly. At first, he thought he was hiding it well. A forced smile here, an excuse there. But Emily wasn't blind. She had lived beside him for nearly a decade. She knew his rhythms, his silences, the subtle shifts in his moods. And now, something was undeniably off. It began with little questions. "Why do you keep your phone on silent lately?" she asked one evening as they cleared the dinner table. "Just habit," David said quickly, stacking plates. Or, "You've been working late a lot. Everything okay at the office?" "Yeah, just projects piling up." She nodded, but her eyes lingered on him longer than before, her silence sharper than words. The first real crack came one Saturday morning. David was in the shower when Emily walked into the bathroom, her phone in hand. "You left this on the counter," she said, setting his buzzing phone beside the sink. David froze, water cascading down his face. His heart raced as he turned to see Samantha's name glowing across the screen. He snatched the phone quickly, fumbling to shut it off. "Work stuff," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Emily didn't press, but the look in her eyes told him everything. She wasn't convinced. Suspicion grew quietly, like ivy creeping up a wall. Emily watched him more closely, noticing details she had once overlooked: the way he guarded his phone, the faint scent of perfume that wasn't hers, the distracted faraway look in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. One night, she asked again, this time her voice sharper. "David, are you seeing someone?" The question sliced through him like a blade. "What? No. Of course not." His denial came too fast, too defensive. Emily studied him, her eyes glistening. "You used to look me in the eyes when you said things like that." Her words gutted him. He wanted to confess right then, to fall at her feet and beg forgiveness. But fear, of losing her, of losing Noah, of shattering everything, clamped his mouth shut. "I'm just stressed," he repeated, softer this time. Emily turned away, but her silence screamed louder than any accusation. Meanwhile, Samantha grew impatient. "You're playing with fire," she warned during one of their secret meetings. "If you don't tell her, I will." David's temper flared. "Don't threaten me." Samantha crossed her arms, her smile bitter. "I'm not threatening, David. I'm reminding you that you can't keep both worlds. Eventually, one of them will burn." The words haunted him. At home, he tried harder to cover his tracks, deleting messages, sneaking showers to wash off Samantha's perfume, forcing smiles he no longer felt. But every effort only made the cracks more visible. Emily wasn't passive. One evening, after David claimed he had a late meeting, she drove by his office. His car wasn't there. Her chest tightened as dread coiled inside her. She didn't know where he was, but she knew he wasn't where he said. She didn't confront him right away. Instead, she waited, observing. She began noting his excuses, the times he slipped out, the patterns forming like puzzle pieces clicking into place. Her heart ached with every suspicion, torn between disbelief and the growing certainty that her husband was lying to her. David could feel the ground shifting beneath him. Every glance from Emily carried unspoken questions. Every silence at the dinner table felt like a trial he was failing. One night, after Noah went to bed, Emily finally broke. "I don't know who you are anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You come home late, you lie to me, you look right through me like I'm not even here." David's throat tightened. "Emily, please, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" she snapped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Because if you're not cheating, then tell me what's tearing us apart." He stood there, frozen, shame crashing over him like a tidal wave. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Emily shook her head, wiping her tears. "I don't even recognize you anymore, David." She walked upstairs, leaving him in the kitchen with his silence. For the first time since the affair began, David realized the truth. He wasn't just betraying Emily in secret anymore. He was losing her in plain sight. And the mask he had worn so carefully was beginning to shatter. Emily had lived for months in the shadow of suspicion, but suspicion was not proof. Proof was a knife that cut both ways. It could destroy the last remnants of trust, but it could also set her free from the torment of doubt. And proof was what she finally found. It happened on a Thursday evening. David had gone to a late client dinner, leaving Emily alone with Noah. After tucking her son into bed, Emily walked past David's office. The door was slightly ajar, his laptop glowing on the desk. She hesitated. A knot formed in her stomach. She wasn't the kind of woman who snooped, at least, she hadn't been. But lies had changed her. Lies had forced her into someone she never thought she'd become. Her hands trembled as she sat at the desk and opened the laptop. The screen revealed his email inbox. At first, nothing incriminating, just mundane work updates, financial reports, scheduling notes. But then her eyes caught on a folder labeled personal. She clicked. And there it was. Dozens of messages. From Samantha. Some recent, others stretching back months. Emily's breath hitched as she scrolled. Words of affection, longing, and desire spilled across the screen. Can't stop thinking about last night. When are you going to tell her? I hate being your secret. Emily's vision blurred with tears. Her hand flew to her mouth as if she could physically hold back the sobs threatening to escape. But she didn't stop reading. She couldn't. Her eyes landed on one message that shattered her completely. Noah looks just like you when he laughs. Sometimes I wonder if he'll ever know the real reason you're not home as much. Emily slammed the laptop shut, her chest heaving. She stumbled back, clutching the edge of the desk to steady herself. Her worst fear wasn't just confirmed, it was painted in cruel, undeniable detail. The hours that followed blurred into a haze of heartbreak and fury. Emily paced the house, her mind racing. She thought of every lie, every excuse, every stolen moment when David had chosen another woman over their family. By the time David walked through the door that night, Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. He froze when he saw her. Something in her posture, in the icy stillness of her eyes, told him this wasn't a normal night. Emily. His voice cracked slightly. She didn't answer. Instead, she slid the laptop across the table. Open it. David's stomach dropped. His hand hovered over the lid, reluctant. Emily, please. Open it. Her shout startled even herself, but the dam had already broken. With shaking hands, David lifted the lid. The screen lit up, frozen on Samantha's latest email. He stared, hollow, at the words that had betrayed him. Emily's voice trembled, equal parts anguish and rage. How long, David? How long have you been lying to me? He opened his mouth, closed it again. He couldn't look at her. Answer me, she demanded, slamming her fist on the table. Months, he whispered finally, his voice so soft it barely carried. Emily's face crumpled as if he had struck her. Months. Her whole body shook as she pushed back from the table. While I was here, raising our son, keeping this house, believing in us, you were with her. David tried to step closer, his hands raised. Emily, please, I made a mistake. Don't you dare call it a mistake, she snapped. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is missing a phone call. What you did is a choice. Over and over again, you chose her. You chose lies. Her words sliced him open. He wanted to reach for her, to beg, to explain, but there was no explanation strong enough to bridge the chasm he had created. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she whispered the words that tore them both apart. You broke us, David. You broke me. The silence that followed was suffocating. David stood rooted in place, his heart pounding, shame clawing at his insides. Emily turned away, wiping at her tears, her body trembling with the weight of betrayal. For a long time, neither of them moved. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice hollow. I want you out. Tonight. David flinched. Emily, don't, please, don't do this in front of Noah. Then leave before he wakes up, she said coldly, not even turning to look at him. The finality in her tone pierced him deeper than any scream. David gathered a few belongings in silence, his movements slow, mechanical. Each step toward the door felt like walking through quicksand, dragging the weight of his sins with him. When he finally left, the sound of the door closing echoed through the house like a death knell. Emily sank to the floor, sobbing into her hands. She had her proof. She had her truth. But the truth hadn't set her free. It had shattered her world. For Samantha, patience had always been a weapon. She had waited, bided her time, endured the stolen glances and hushed phone calls, the quiet sting of being the other woman. Every time David left her bed to return to his wife and child, she told herself the same thing, soon. And now, finally, soon had arrived. David showed up at her apartment in the middle of the night, his face pale, his eyes red from sleepless tears. He carried only a duffel bag. Samantha opened the door with an expression that was equal parts shock and satisfaction. "She knows," he said simply, his voice hollow. Samantha's heart gave a triumphant lurch. For a split second, she masked it with concern, but inside, she was electric with victory. "What happened?" she asked softly, touching his arm. David exhaled shakily. "She found the emails. Everything. She told me to leave." Samantha stepped aside, ushering him in. The door closed behind them with a quiet click that felt, to her, like the final seal on Emily's defeat. She busied herself in the kitchen, making tea, while David sat slumped on the couch like a broken man. His shoulders hunched forward, his hands buried in his face. "This isn't how I wanted it to happen," he muttered. Samantha set the mugs down and slid beside him. Her perfume, sweet, heavy, intoxicating, filled the air. "David, it was going to happen eventually. You couldn't live two lives forever." He shook his head. "But Emily, and Noah," his voice cracked. "God, what have I done?" For the briefest moment, guilt tugged at Samantha's chest. But it passed quickly, smothered by ambition. She stroked his arm. "You've made mistakes, yes. But now you have a chance to be honest. To start over. With me." David lifted his gaze to hers, weary and uncertain. His silence was all the invitation she needed. She leaned in, kissed him, soft at first, then deeper, pouring every ounce of triumph into that moment. For Samantha, it wasn't just about passion anymore. It was about winning. The next morning, Samantha's world shifted. David hadn't returned to Emily. He was still here, in her apartment, making coffee in her kitchen, answering work emails from her dining table. For years, she had been the secret. Now, she was the one he turned to. The balance of power had changed. She dressed in silk and confidence, her every movement a quiet declaration, "He's mine now." When she walked into her boutique that day, her employees noticed the glow. She was radiant, commanding, unstoppable. Whispers spread, about how the married architect had finally left his wife. Samantha didn't confirm it, but she didn't deny it either. She let the rumors blossom like wildflowers, because for once, the story favored her. Yet beneath her triumph, there lingered a flicker of unease. At night, when David lay awake staring at the ceiling, Samantha pretended not to notice. When he flinched at Noah's name or grew quiet after checking his phone, she smoothed it over with kisses and distractions. But she could see it. The way his soul seemed fractured, his guilt gnawing at him from the inside out. And she knew, though she would never admit it aloud, that no matter how much he tried, a part of him would always belong to the family he'd left behind. 2 weeks after moving in with Samantha, David received the divorce papers. Emily had wasted no time. The delivery man handed him the envelope while he stood in Samantha's doorway. His hands trembled as he broke the seal, reading the cold legal language that marked the end of his marriage. Samantha watched him closely, her lips curving into a practiced line of sympathy. "It's better this way," she whispered, draping her arms around him from behind. "Clean break. New beginning." But David didn't answer. He just stared at the papers, his face unreadable. Inside, Samantha's heart swelled with satisfaction. She had what Emily no longer did, David's presence, his future, his name whispered against her skin at night. And yet, somewhere in the back of her mind, an uninvited thought lingered: victory built on destruction was fragile. That evening, Samantha stood before the mirror, slipping on a crimson dress. David emerged from the shower, towel slung around his waist, exhaustion etched into every line of his body. She turned to him, radiant, her eyes gleaming. "Dinner at the Ivy? Celebrate our new chapter." David hesitated, then forced a smile. "Sure." As Samantha kissed him, she tasted not passion but resignation. Still, she clung to it, convincing herself that time would heal his wounds and bind him to her completely. Because Samantha had won. And winners didn't question the cost. At first, David told himself he could adapt. Yes, the guilt gnawed at him. Yes, every time he thought of Noah's laugh or Emily's soft humming in the kitchen, a jagged knife twisted inside his chest. But he convinced himself that it was temporary. That time would dull the edges, that Samantha's devotion could fill the hollowness. But time didn't heal. It only revealed how deep the wound really was. In Samantha's apartment, everything felt foreign. The walls were painted in bold jewel tones, the air thick with perfume and candle smoke. It was beautiful, luxurious even, but it wasn't home. He would wake in the middle of the night disoriented, reaching instinctively for Emily's side of the bed only to find silk sheets and Samantha's warm skin. The dissonance unsettled him. One night, Samantha rolled toward him, whispering, "You're mine now, David." The words weren't meant to be sinister, but they echoed in his mind like shackles. Mine now. Meanwhile, the outside world was less forgiving than Samantha's embrace. Their social circle buzzed with gossip. Friends distanced themselves, siding with Emily, who carried herself with quiet dignity despite the betrayal. Neighbors whispered behind cupped hands. Colleagues treated David with a mix of pity and disdain. And then came the professional blow. David had been on track to lead a high-profile development project in downtown Chicago, a career-defining moment. But whispers about his affair, coupled with Emily's powerful connections in the design community, reached the wrong ears. The firm's partners decided he was a liability. The project went to someone else. When he received the news, David sat in his car for an hour, numb. He'd sacrificed his family, his reputation, for what? For Samantha's smile across a candlelit table. For stolen moments that now felt heavy with consequence. At Samantha's boutique, she tried to lift his spirits. "Baby, you don't need them," she said, sliding her arms around his waist as he slumped against the counter. "You're brilliant. You can start your own firm. We'll do it together." But her optimism felt hollow. David had once loved her fire, her relentless ambition. Now it grated against the exhaustion in his bones. What he wanted wasn't a fresh empire. What he wanted was peace. And peace had lived with Emily. The breaking point came one rainy Saturday afternoon. David had promised Samantha they'd spend the day looking at potential office spaces. Instead, he drove past his old house. The front lawn was damp, the windows glowing with warmth. Through the curtain, he caught a glimpse of Emily sitting with Noah at the dining table, helping him with homework. Noah laughed, banging his pencil against the paper, and Emily leaned in, smiling the same smile that had once lit David's darkest days. It hit him like a punch to the chest. This was the life he had abandoned. This was the home he had destroyed. Tears stung his eyes, and for the first time since leaving, David admitted to himself the truth: he wasn't free. He was exiled. When he returned to Samantha's, his clothes damp from the rain, she met him at the door with a bright grin. "Found some great spaces today. You should have come. One of them has a skyline view, perfect for your new firm." David stared at her, silent. The words washed over him, meaningless. He realized with a sickening clarity that he didn't want a new firm. He didn't want a skyline view. He didn't even want Samantha's victories, no matter how much she wanted to share them. He wanted his life back. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, the city lights bleeding into the rain-smeared glass. Samantha slept soundly behind him, content in her illusion of triumph. But David saw only collapse. His marriage, gone. His son, slipping away. His career, tarnished. His soul, eroded by choices he could never undo. For the first time, David wondered if this was what rock bottom felt like. Not a dramatic fall, but a slow erosion, until you wake one day to realize there's nothing left. And deep down, he knew, it was only the beginning of his downfall. While David sank under the weight of his choices, Emily discovered something she hadn't felt in years: freedom. At first, the silence of the house without him was unbearable. The absence echoed in every room, his shoes no longer by the door, his coffee mug missing from the counter, the space beside her in bed cold and empty. For weeks, she cried herself to sleep, her body aching with grief. But grief, she realized, was not permanent. It was a visitor. And like all visitors, eventually, it left. Her strength began with small acts. She started waking up earlier, brewing coffee for herself instead of waiting for David. She enrolled Noah in a weekend soccer league and sat proudly on the sidelines, cheering louder than anyone else. She reached out to friends she had lost touch with over the years, rediscovering laughter and connection. The Emily who had once felt trapped in David's shadow was slowly re-emerging. At work, too, she thrived. Freed from the constant strain of hiding his lies and soothing his temper, she poured herself into her projects with renewed energy. Clients noticed. Colleagues respected her. Within months, she was offered a promotion, a leadership role that once might have intimidated her but now felt like a challenge she was ready to conquer. She no longer defined herself by being David's wife. She was Emily Carter, architect, mother, survivor. Still, healing wasn't linear. Some nights she lay awake, replaying the betrayal, wondering how she had missed the signs. Other times, she questioned her worth, haunted by the thought, was I not enough? But when those doubts surfaced, Noah's smile grounded her. Mom, he said one evening after scoring his first soccer goal, you're the best cheerleader ever. In his innocent eyes, she saw the truth, she was enough. She always had been. Months passed, and Emily's life blossomed in ways she hadn't imagined. She joined a book club, where she found herself laughing late into the night with a group of women who had all faced heartbreak in their own ways. She traveled for the first time in years, taking Noah on a weekend trip to the Grand Canyon. Standing at the rim, the vastness before her, she felt something shift inside, an understanding that life was still vast, still beautiful, still hers to claim. It was on one of these book club nights that she met Michael. Michael was different from David in every possible way. He was gentle where David had been sharp, patient where David had been restless. A widower raising a teenage daughter, Michael knew loss, but he also knew resilience. Their first conversation was simple, about the book they'd read, about parenting, about the absurdities of suburban life. But Emily felt something stir, a spark she hadn't expected to feel again. She didn't rush into anything. She wasn't looking for replacement or rescue. But she allowed herself the possibility of joy, of connection, of a future untainted by lies. The community, too, rallied around her. Neighbors who once pitted her now admired her strength. Friends marveled at how she carried herself, not with bitterness, but with quiet grace. Even those who gossiped eventually shifted their tone. Emily wasn't the woman betrayed anymore. She was the woman who had risen. And as her life expanded, David's world continued to shrink. She heard whispers through mutual acquaintances, his stalled career, his strained relationship with Samantha, his struggles to find footing. But Emily didn't dwell on his downfall. She no longer lived in the shadow of his choices. She lived in the light of her own. One evening, as she tucked Noah into bed, he looked up at her and asked, "Mom, are you happy?" The question caught her off guard. She brushed a hand over his hair and thought for a moment. "I think I'm learning how to be," she said honestly. "And that's a pretty good start." Noah smiled, satisfied with her answer, and drifted off to sleep. Emily stood there for a long while, watching him breathe, realizing that happiness wasn't a distant dream. It was here, in the small victories, in the resilience she had built, in the life she was creating day by day. She had been broken, yes. But she was no longer shattered. She was rebuilding. Stronger. Wiser. Free. It was almost a year after David walked out of their home when he showed up at Emily's doorstep again. The knock came on a quiet Sunday evening. Emily had just finished helping Noah with a school project when she heard it, a hesitant, uneven knock that didn't belong to the neighbors. Her stomach tightened as she opened the door. David stood there, older somehow. His hair was unkempt, his suit wrinkled. The confident man who had once charmed boardrooms and dinners alike was gone. In his place stood someone broken, someone searching. "Emily," he said, his voice low. "Can we talk?" For a long moment, Emily just looked at him. Memories rushed back, his lies, the nights she cried alone, the moment the truth shattered their marriage. And yet, standing here now, she also saw the man who had once made her laugh until her cheeks hurt, who had held her hand in the hospital when Noah was born. She stepped aside. Not out of hope, but out of grace. They sat in the living room, the space both familiar and foreign. David fumbled with his hands, his eyes darting around the room as if afraid to meet hers. "I've made mistakes," he began. His voice cracked. "The worst mistakes of my life. Samantha's gone. She left months ago. And I lost everything. My job, my reputation, myself. I thought I was choosing freedom, but I was just digging my own grave." Emily's jaw tightened. "And now you want what? Forgiveness? To come back like nothing happened?" David's eyes filled with tears. "No. I know I don't deserve that. I needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I threw away. You. Noah. Us. And I'm sorry. God, Emily, I'm so sorry." Silence hung heavy between them. For a fleeting second, Emily felt the old pull, the part of her that once wanted so desperately to fix things, to believe in promises. But that part of her wasn't in charge anymore. "I spent months wondering why I wasn't enough," she said quietly. "But I've realized I was always enough. You just didn't see it." David lowered his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. "You don't have to forgive me," he whispered. "I just needed to say it. Needed to tell you before I disappear completely." Emily studied him, her heart heavy but steady. She thought of Noah upstairs, safe and asleep. She thought of her new life, the laughter with her friends, the strength she had found in herself, the cautious but genuine connection she was building with Michael. She thought of how far she had come. "David," she said firmly, "you were a chapter of my life. But you're not the whole story. Not anymore." He looked up, desperation flickering in his eyes. "Does that mean there's no chance?" Emily took a deep breath. "It means I wish you healing. I hope you find a way to rebuild. But with me? That door is closed." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then David nodded, broken but resigned. "Take care of him," he said softly. "Of Noah. He deserves better than me." Emily's voice steadied. "He already has better. He has me." David flinched, then stood slowly. Without another word, he walked to the door. This time, Emily didn't stop him. She didn't look back as he left. The click of the door closing was final, an ending, but also a beginning. Later that night, Emily sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, the cool air brushing against her skin. She felt no triumph in rejecting him, no gloating in his downfall. What she felt instead was clarity. Life wasn't about punishing him. It wasn't about revenge or regret. It was about her choice, the choice to move forward, to build something new, something honest, something hers. She glanced at her phone, where a new message blinked on the screen. It was from Michael. Dinner this week? I'd love to see you and Noah. Emily smiled softly. The past was behind her. The future was hers to shape. For the first time in years, she felt truly, undeniably free.